Monica about 10 years ago with the kink drink, and it's time's up. That said, it is my area of expertise. I'm going to own that nowadays. I've been kinky, alternative, poly, submissive, cut queen for 41 years, and I teach around the world, which is pretty cool, and I facilitate workshops around the world. This is Poppy. Want to introduce yourself?
Hello everybody, I am Poppy. I hang on to Deb's coattails,
That is
depending on
not
who you
true.
are. No, that's not.
She's got a hole in her trousers.
I've got a
Leah
hole in
goes
my
up hers.
I have been around in the scene about 20 years now. I feel very old saying that, so I've got experience of. No, 20 years, a long time. But I've, been around for a long time, and within that time, I've had a career predominantly within the NHS. Like many other people, when COVID happened, lockdown happened, I diversified and started offering appointments predominantly to people within the community. Felt like I had a lot to give as a lived experience practitioner. So we've been friends for a number of years, and we started doing the workshops together online. I've been a friend of Lan for a very, very long time. So I'm popular the scene counsellor, and so good to meet you all. Sometimes when I'm in London, I do these things with guests.
And we also, so I started these workshops during COVID. I was doing 2 workshops a week for everybody, free of charge. One for Lamb and one for, I started doing them myself because sometimes with the connections to Lamb people aren't always happy with. So I did one by myself and one with Lamb, and they were 2 a week. And then that went to a little less. So now we still offer them, and now Poppy comes in as well. I think there must have been a couple of thousand of them by now. So we still offer them once a month, and every other month they change. They're free of charge. They're a couple of hours. It's on Zoom. You can always join when you want. One is a Q&A, and then the next one has a subject that somebody sends in. This month's one is the classic December one, which is about how to manage holidays. Doesn't have to be Christmas. How to manage away from people that you like or love. How to manage without play. How to manage if you're poly, how to manage if you're having an affair or a secret, how to manage multiple things, how to manage a fucking toxic family. How to manage loving relationships. It's all about that. It's all about how to do that and what to do. So that's December's, and that's actually next week as well, as I say. If you want to follow me on FetLife, if you're on there, I am the Kink Strength, capital T, capital K, capital S. So, the idea of these workshops, it's funny, I don't really use Facebook anymore, but one of the things I do is I go on it every day so I can delete all of my memories. I'm the opposite to everyone at the moment. That's what I'm consistently doing. It's like, fuck. How to write that in public? Come on in and grab a seat anyway. Like, just don't hit that thing. So I delete all my memories, and it was funny, I think it was today, so it's about 8-9 years ago, it said, doing my 30th Lamb, still impressed that people show up or something like that. So the idea of these workshops was many years ago. I phoned David and said, no one does a psychology workshop on the scene. They're not around yet. Can I do one? And this room was crazy full. That people were sitting all over the floor and everything. We broke every fire red there was. Got asked the first 2 classics. I'm kinky, am I fucked up and I've had trauma? And do you think kink is self-harm? I was like, baptism of fire. And then we did a workshop, and it seemed quite popular, and I said to David, well, maybe I'll come back, maybe we'll do it like once a year or something. And then more and more reviews were given in, and now this has become, it was like, do you want to come back next month? And so now it's the only consistent workshop through Lamb, and it's an hour and a half, and I know a few of you have got to leave a little bit early because you've already told me that. So when you see people walk out, just
And it is amazing. I mean, I remember, it must be 20 years ago now, and I remember writing on reactants in the context of that time I was in a relationship 24/7 that had quite a significant transfer of power and authority. And we wrote a piece about reactants, and I think that quickly came to knowledge of the concept of internal enslavement, which for a little while was quite popular. It kind of fluctuates in popularity as the scene does, but it really was actually quite unusual to have any piece that was grounded in, and it was not, it was not good psychology or hard psychology at all, but to have something that was even grounded like that was really different and new and innovative. And then I think you kind of obviously took that somewhere really special. But yeah, it's now interesting to see, we were talking about this, there's quite a few psychologically minded people in our community, but it certainly wasn't always like that. So we've really done a lot to transform.
Yeah, thank you. very kind. So like the concept of these workshops is, I don't know what the fuck you're going to ask. What I do fucking know is you won't ask it for 20 minutes. And then you will ask it, and then we get to the end and you all grab me. I'm like, I just want to fucking go home now. And they're not that this is the expert, this is not, that's not what they're about. Like if you have something to say, let's share it. If I think you're wrong, I also fucking say. I think there is some really bad information out there. I think people talk like experts all the time. People think they know what they're talking about, and they do not. And I think that we often mix people's age with their experience, which is a shit ton of bollocks. There's this whole thing of somebody in their 50s, I really want to be with them, they're so experienced. Oh no, wait, that's only if they're a man, sorry. If you're a woman in your 50s, you're too experienced for me, like you're old. It's a bit different. Ooh, there's a generalisation. So I think it's really important to go for factual research, proper information, rather than opinion. However, there isn't a lot of research out there about him. Like there are a few people to follow. There aren't that many. Richard Sprott is definitely one of them and very associated in America. And a lot of, we were talking about actually in the car that,
In the car.
Something was always in the car with us, isn't it? There was a certain person, she does a lot of talks and it's always like understanding kink. And I once went to a talk that said the psychology of kink. It wasn't, it was a kink 101. And a lot of people tend to sanitize, vanillarize us and try to explain and do things. And actually, I think we need to talk to each other so we don't have that and don't get that. So this is an open Q&A. Whatever you want to ask, you ask. What do we talk about? Psychology, relationships, fucking genetics, epigenetics, because that's my bingo card. That's what we talked about. We talk about mental health. We talk about wellness. We talk about psychology of kink. We talk about a lot of these things. So over to you for your first question.
A lot is spoken about aftercare for subs, and I'd like to know what your take or advice would be for aftercare for DOMs.
Well, actually, funny enough,
DOMs.
yeah, but as soon as you said that, no, I mean DOMs as well.
Yeah.
I would go with that. Like that's a really interesting thing. So aftercare, what does it mean? So aftercare can be. Does anyone know what aftercare is? Let's start with that. What does it mean?
Just cooling down.
Coming down?
Cooling down.
Cooling down could be part of it. Might not be all of it. What were you going to say?
It's basically looking after the person, yourself, in terms of as endorphins wear off, you might feel a sudden drop, and therefore it's about how to go through that period. And the aftercare is maybe giving a blanket, ice cream, whatever it is that works for that particular person in terms of getting down from that.
It's the responsibility for their mental health as they come out of that space.
Care and attention days after what
Yeah, so can you see the problem here, first of all, right? So many definitions. What definition matters? Yours. That's it. Aftercare is whatever you want it to be. And I'm going to argue a little bit with you. I do argue with people. Your wellness, although I want to look after you, is not my fucking responsibility. First of all, what matters before you do aftercare is negotiation. What does aftercare look like for you and for me? If you have your fist up someone's arse on a Sunday night and they want you to take the whole of Monday off, but you work, that might not be possible. It cannot be negotiated. And it isn't fair to expect someone to be on the end of their phone. So aftercare needs to be negotiated. Some people need loads, some people need none. It also depends, especially if we're going to go into childbearing women for a second, what time in the month it is. Let's not blame that for anything. And our hormones need different things at different times for different reasons. All of these things come into it. Are you stressed? Are you working? What's happening? So aftercare starts with a negotiation. You might want lots, you might want none, but then you need to ask, what does that look like? How will I experience that? What can I give to you? What do I want from you? Because the other thing we talk about is when you've got a person, I've got a whole writing on this, that's going to be my gravestone. I've got a whole writing, come on in, I've got a whole writing all about aftercare, if you ever follow me or whatever, so it's all in there. So it can be a variety of things. It can be the supply of warmth. It can be the supply of love and affection. It can be the supply of tightness, care, holding. It can be the supply of certain foods in certain ways in order to help that person come up. It can be the supply of time. It can be nothing
I
at all.
was going to say, I have someone who likes just to be left alone.
Yeah, I like to be left alone. I don't get drop afterwards. And can we also point out that we talk about drop, everybody fucking gets drop. It is not sub drop, it's not dumb drop, it's fucking love. How many people have ever done a show or been in a musical or performed? You get fucking drop every time afterwards. You know, you miss it and you feel sad and overwhelmed. It isn't exclusive to us. It is a normal chemical reaction to a group of chemicals that we create. It isn't about just endorphins or highs. It's about a lift in norepinephrine, dopamine, oxytocin. It's a cocktail. And actually, somebody might have no cocktails from that. And a top, I'm going to go for tops and bottoms, is just as likely to get that as a bottom. Or not just as likely, which is why it needs to be part of negotiation. What you've got to start with is you. What do I want from aftercare? What is reasonable for me to ask for? What is realistic for me to ask for and even get? So you have to start with you. And then you've gone on to sound a little bit about neuroscience, a little bit biology, a little bit about nutrition. It's actually pretty fucking complex. We know, like, I see it, the amount of workshops I've done in dungeons and stuff, and there's always a lolly or a bit of sugar there. Awesome, that is going to lift you up. But fuck me, it's going to make you drop your knickers quicker than anything. It's sugar, up, straight down. You need protein, you need care, you need different things in those moments.
Also, it's a really bad idea if you're subs-diabetic.
Turkey, we all need turkey. Yeah.
Tryptophans. And if you're a vegetarian, it's how do you get, what is it that you need? So tryptophans are precursors for sleep and for care of ourselves and for dopamine, for how we feel happy.
Yeah,
It
bananas
also-
as well.
Yeah, bananas, but potassium as well. But it also comes into, are you neurodivergent? Because actually, if you're ADHD, you're going to have a very different chemical need in a moment, and it needs to be fed in a completely different way. Autism, not quite the same. ADHD, I'm ADHD, we look at our dopamine differently to everybody else. And genders do sometimes what we're born as. I'm being very specific because that's the research. So for me with aftercare, it's all about, do you know what you want? You put it on the table and it becomes a negotiation. And actually, you don't always have all the information because you don't know enough about nutrition, biology, neuroscience, impact of bruising, impact of pain, impact of giving pain, what it's going to bring up, whether you get some kind of shame, whether you feel overwhelmed by the fact that you've hurt somebody or been hurt, by the fact that you've just had a gangbang and you've had 3 million cocks inside every part of you, and you're like, oh shit, my mum talks about sluts, now I'm one. You know, it's all of that, or God, I shouldn't do that to somebody. Because all of these are misconceptions. You can have who you want inside you, and you can do whatever you want. However, when you're in relationships and different things, you then have to consider the other person as well. So what would you say about
This is why I find these workshops hard, because I come after you all the time.
Sorry.
But I think it's really, really interesting, actually. I think what you were saying there's aftercare, and I think we do within the community sometimes get a little bit lost with that afterword. And the reality is it's care. How do I want to be cared for? How do I want to be cared for in this? It might be a relationship, it might just be, you know, an interpersonal connection that we play once a fortnight and this is what we do with one another. But what do we really want that to look like and how do we want it to look? And if we don't know how we want to be cared for in the context of what this relationship looks like, we're going to have no idea what we want it to look like afterwards. And I agree, you know, I would really get rid of this, I don't like the term, we get lost in terms, don't we? We change them all of the time. But I really do not like the term sub drop. I don't even like the term, you know, dom drop. I like the term drop. And you've done a wonder, if anybody wants to look at drop, you know, put the kink, shrink and drop into that life, and a really comprehensive writing will come up. I think it's really, really important that we do have the facts and we have the science, but also how do we want to be cared for in the context of whatever this is.
I can't find an awful lot of information about how a dom asks a sub for that though.
But, okay, so that's really interesting.
Because
Why do you need information in order to ask for what you want? If this is
Yeah.
a mutual reciprocal relationship,
Yeah.
for me, where we come from is you always start with you. You write out a list of what you want and what you would like and what it looks like. You have a conversation with somebody, but also it depends on the relationship. If you're a service top for a minute, does that person owe you any aftercare or not? It all goes both ways. And actually, and you are the dom in this moment. You could say, we are going to negotiate this as part of what we both want. Let me ask you, and you still ask me.
I would use the structures that are already in place in the context of that relationship because it makes it easier. So if you're using the Obedience Act, for example, actually my expectations change a little bit in the 24 hours after we've played. Is that okay that my expectations change? Because what have you got going on in your world for you? But if this is all agreed and negotiated and there's consent there, this is how it changes. Our rituals change. I have these expectations of you. You absolutely, are going to bring me coffee and look after me the following morning. If that's how you work, what is it that you want? How do you want care to be demonstrated?
Yeah.
How do you already have those systems in place? And how do you want them to be increased a little bit in the context of the after?
Yeah.
And for me, it might be actually, do you know what? We have all of these rituals in place. We have good morning texts. We have things that we do with each other. But you know what? After a scene, because this is how I want less the day after. I would really appreciate if I could just be left the fuck alone. But I know you really value this connection that we have on a daily basis. I want a little bit of slack to be cut. It might be that in actual fact you want to be wrapped like a burrito and fed chocolate. But that's very, very personal, and that comes at the point of prior to play. But for me, I would keep it very much in terms of the systems that you've got as a dom, as a dominant, however you identify. What does it look like, and how do you want it to be different?
Yeah.
And the reality is, you might not know, and that's why I think it's really important to have debriefs after scenes, particularly really heavy or intense scenes. I talk about radars
But
a
not
lot.
straight away.
Yeah, if you're not aware of what
Because you're all
radar is.
too technical. aren't you?
Afterwards, really talk about what worked and what didn't work. It might be that this needs to be renegotiated, how you want that care to look in the context of post-play. What sort of play is it? How I would like to be cared for post-impact play, Sharps, for example, is very different to a full immersive weekend of age play. I need different things. And quite often what happens is we get into difficulties because someone has not anticipated our needs, but the reality is we didn't know what we needed and we haven't effectively communicated it anyway. So have we got a relationship where it's all right to get it wrong? Have we got a relationship where we can grow, where we can revalue it, where we can talk about it, we communicate and go back to the table? For me, actually, we're just going to have the dynamic gets put to one side and we're going to have a walk with the dog once a week to talk about what went well and what didn't. Or it's an online relationship, so we're going to check in with one another and we're going to leave the dynamic, we're going to leave the transfer of whatever it is that we've got over here, and we're going to feed back really fucking honestly once a week, once a fortnight, once, 3 days after whenever we've played.
Yeah.
Do those structures exist within the relationship? And I think that's actually more important than this idea of, has somebody packed a kit bag with a blanket and a lollipop? Because that's really what aftercare used to look like a long time ago. I'm sounding like no lady.
Yeah,
I think,
all right, good.
I could really get aftercare because I took somebody's blanket and I had a boost in the bag. I'm a stupid dog. I'm very patronising, but actually there's a lot more to it than that. And some of it is about the foundations that the relationship sits within.
And you've got to know yourself first, what it is that you want and what that looks like. And you've still got to be realistic about what someone
Well, I
else
think
can
what
do
happened
for
was
you.
we did a scene and I wasn't expecting to feel how I
Yes, there you go.
Yeah, and that's
And actually, in that moment, it's really important to say, do you know what? I know I promised you this. You've got to be careful about promising as well, because expectations are the fucking cunt of relationships. They absolutely get in the way of everything. If I do this, I think you should do this. If we do that, I think they should do that. Fucking get real. Emotions overwhelm us. They're not facts, and they impact how we communicate. But also expectations of you're the top, you're the bottom. That's your gender. That's my gender. That's your position sexually. That's my position. There are so many things, and we don't even understand that. Actually, some people don't even know where they are. It's all about the emotional turmoil, and that's all to do with attachment, with relationship issues, with how you've been brought up, mixed with all of these things. So we're fucking complex, and we say, do you want a blanket? It doesn't really cover it.
It's human first, isn't it? The impact
Yeah.
topping a scene and still human being. And even, sometimes we might not know what it is we don't know. But what we can say is that these are my tells. My tells that I'm going to drop quite hard or quite significant or need something from you, or these things. If I'm very quiet actually in the car on the way home from a FET event, the chances are that for me is a tell that I might actually drop more significantly from this than if I'm not in that place. And then people who know me and have played for me for a number of years will probably know that. You might not know what all of your tells are, but I think regardless of how you identify in the context of the scene, and if you're new to things, I think it's really important to journal actually. I'm a big fan of that. Even if it's just for yourself in terms of, my response to the scene was not as I anticipated, what am I in the morning saying that that might be the case again moving forward? What have I learned about me, and how do I transfer that to the relationship?
And another one of my favourite words, which everybody gets pissed off about, is pre-mortem. So pre-mortem, when you do a post-mortem, we can say that the person that killed this person was 6'2", was left-handed and used a hammer to smash their fucking skull in because half of it's missing. But we know that because of how the patterns work. There's also forensic pre-mortem, post-morteming of this was also a person who lives at home with their mother. They're probably 40 and they've got some issues. That's always what we go to, isn't it? That's a load of bollocks, but that's what we go to. To pre-mortem is what NASA do. So when you go into space, there's a really good TED talk on this. So when you go into space, you are taught to go blind. You will go blind. The statistics are very high when you are up there because of gravity, and we produce around 20,000 gallons of tears every year of 3 different forms. The films that you have over your eyes, the chemical responses to tears, and the emotional tears that we cry. Regardless, it's a lot of fucking shit, isn't it, that comes out of our eyes. So when you're in zero gravity, a lot of this stuff has nowhere to go, so it builds up. So you are very likely to all of a sudden need some assistance because you're going to go blind. So you are taught when you're engineering to do it with both eyes open, then one, then the other, and both eyes shut. So we know how to do it. Now, experience is pre-morteming in and of itself. We've got to be careful it doesn't predict, however, as well. And it's really okay to say, right, what if I fucking totally hate this person now? What if all I want to do is eat cauliflower soup? What if I just want to get pissed? What if I? And then have some ideas around that, all the potential. So you do cover things. I'm a massive believer, I talk about this whether you're a top or a bottom. So boring, I say these things very regularly, is you need to write your own Haynes manual. For those of you who are under the age of 50, probably. Fuck. So when the internet wasn't around, right, when I started, I am that old, 60 in a year and a half. So, and that's not patronising. You couldn't look it up. You didn't know. You had to talk to people. You had to research. You had to look. So every time you bought a car or a bike or anything with an engine, you've got something called a Haynes manual that said, open the door. Okay, this is how you do this, all the way through it. I have advocated for the last 30, 40 years. If you've heard this, I can guarantee you it's like it came from me. So, but lots of people say it now. Write your own fucking manual. This is my user manual. This is how I work. This is what I want. And in that, say, when I do this, I'm probably asking for this. And listen, when you meet someone on a first date, don't give it to them.
Not even a second date.
I mean, here's my 350-page document of how you've got to treat me means they're walking out. However, you can also, that's the other benefit, you didn't handwrite it, you can say, I know this stuff, I can share it. And that's what pre-mortem is about. And when you do your own Haynes manual, it's so good as a reflective piece of work for you to understand what it is you want and why. You can also question it.
I wish I did one. I'd love to read the one that was.
Yeah, it's so fucking different. And this is a living book. It changes. My needs as a 17 and 18-year-old submissive are totally different to my needs as a 58-year-old submissive. I think and feel differently about myself. I like and want different things. Life has taught me some lessons. I've had an awful lot of therapy. I understand myself differently. And we still all need to do this shit. Because it's that makes the difference. So it's really important. You've got to start with you. You've got to understand that there will be changes. And regardless of your fucking position, I really hate this thing of you should act that way because you're a top and you should act that way because you're a bottom. Fuck off. Like when I used to start on the scene, like honestly, if you want to talk about consent and positions, it was really common for a young woman. I know it still exists. But for a young woman especially, it's like, no, you have to give him a blowjob in order to get into that club. Consent didn't exist in the same way that it exists now.
There was a period where submissive, but not your submissive, was a bit of a revolution. And I mean,
Yeah,
look at that now, and how rudimental is that? You know, the interaction between two human beings, or however we describe consent and wanting to be. And I think we've come a long way from that idea.
I was really weird. I used to wear white to clubs, like white leather high-leg boots. And I was like, you're a bit weird, you're wearing white. Aren't you a dominatrix? No, I'm not. I'm the opposite to that. Hence, I'm wearing white or whatever colour, orange at the moment. So whatever obsession is up, but it was always white. I loved being different from that perspective. But I remember once standing against this wall and my partner at the time was next to me, definitely my dominant, and this woman was next to me here. very dominant just by her clothes and everything else as well. And she just put her glass like this over to me. She said, "Get me a drink." And I've said this story so many times. And I said, "Get your own fucking drink." I was quite rebellious. But also, and it was like that was starting to start that whole thing. And she looked right over me and she said to Roger at the time, "I think you need to learn to control your submissive." And it was really interesting because, you know, if you don't have my back, you can go fuck right off, and he knows that. And he said, "I think you need to learn to control how you treat anybody else's property or how you look at things and who you think you are." And I said, "I am not yours. I have nothing to do with you. I don't owe you anything. You haven't earned who I am." So no, God, does she get hung? But she was really annoyed about this principle. So that we've changed since then. We know, I think actually we know too much. We know too many psychological words. We all categorize ourselves. We all say, "Well, I need these drugs. I've got this. I've got that." Actually, we need to learn who you are as a human being. You need to learn your wants, your cares, and how that translates. And you need to learn how to function in fucking society in order to get it. We ran a Littles event last night. It's our first one. So it was
so good.
we've had so much amazing feedback. So we put this thing together called, because it's always been Poppy's dream, and two things have coincided at the same time. So my daughter owns a soft play venue with her actual partner and two other partners. I'm out and honest. We were talking about it and was like, "Actually, let's do this." So we agreed with them that we'd split it. They're willing to take the risk. I told them every possibility that could go wrong. It's got nappy changing. We had furries, we had kittens, we had babies, we had everybody. But it was really structured. Pinatas and pass the parcel. We also did pass the parcel for the bigs. Where
They were not big.
they were not big. We made a rule like you can take the piss as much as you like without anything. Honestly, I've never seen bigs argue over fucking pens and socks that much. And I did buy outrageous presents. Like the middle of the present pass the parcel was an astronaut projector, because the whole thing for this venue was a space theme. So I bought an astronaut projector for each middle for these three pass the parcels, which puts up all these like nebulous and stars and everything. It was just it just went really well, didn't it? It was just so good. And when you're there watching some of these people, one of the things we offered that was a little bit different, that wasn't really taken up, was a shift in headspace workshop before you go home if you want it. Because you do have to manage life differently out there. Even if you're dropping, even if you want care, how do we manage life is really fucking important. It is not appropriate I've said this before, if I'm pruning my fucking roses at the end of my garden and Mrs. Smith, I don't have a Mrs. Smith, but Mrs. Smith says to me, "Oh, hello, Deborah, how are you? How are things going today?" If I turn around and say, "God, Jesus Christ, I have two cocks in my cunt, one in my arse, I'm a bit tired," to be inappropriate. That is not the person who's going to help me. And if we go onto social media and say, I've said this before, I fucking hate this whole thing of I'm in A&E. What are you asking for? What do you really want there? And how is it going to get you the attention that you need versus what you think you want? Whereas if you start to understand yourself, it's about being dead straight. I don't mean sexually, because I'm not. It's about just asking for what you need or want. I'm fucking tired today. She's fucking tired today, and I've driven up. It's really exhausting to do something like that. Actually, what my needs are is to go home, to rest. I start at 7 tomorrow. Mondays are a bit of a cunt, and I'm going to go and see a movie tomorrow night. Saltburn. They've got to drive back up to Manchester. It's about knowing yourself and understanding what it is that you need. And it's the same here. But then the key is, will you then ask for it?
And that's it. I think we have this lots of perception about what, that's really interesting, what, responsibility and that idea that there is, that accountability, and that idea that there is a different set of expectations for top versus bottom. And really it is, what we do have expectations of one another, but that should be agreed and negotiated. And we are two human beings. How do we want to come together and care for one another as two human beings? And I won't play, I do switch, but I won't play in any capacity with anybody who isn't okay to view me as human first. you know, and I can't carry all of the responsibility. Since I can't carry all the responsibility for, you know, the 60 little that were in the room yesterday, I can't carry the responsibility for somebody else's care. You know, I care for you and I will try and support you in that care, and however which way you communicate and ask me to do so, but that's got to be led by you. It has to. You know, we have to know ourselves fundamentally who we are and what we want and what we do. And I'm really conscious that the person who I am extremely envious of your group basis, by the way. But I think that you wanted to say something a little bit earlier on. We didn't catch you. Were you trying to?
I was just trying to just add to that, because I think you always
Yeah.
say before, or plan for when things go wrong as well.
Yeah.
Because I didn't do that recently and it went very wrong.
Yeah.
Not through the person's fault.
No, I call that
From the
fisticuffs.
venue's
We've got to, there are things that happen that are out of our control, and we can't
Yeah.
blame someone, and sometimes we can. We got written to a couple
Oh
of
no, I
days
did.
ago.
I did very much. I was in a submissive position.
You got
I did
it.
very much jump up and yell at the person who interrupted us and told us that we had to stop mid scene because they were a house dom, and I thought that wasn't acceptable.
Yeah.
And then it's also just to be flexible with your aftercare, because I didn't know what I needed,
Yeah.
and I
Yeah.
have very strict
So much.
anxiety and OCD and regulations.
Mm.
And if I am not flexible with that, I will ground myself into a hole, which I did. So just to
And flexibility is really hard. You know, for some people it's harder than for others, and for some people we know that, you know, we there's no studies on this, but I'm absolutely certain that there was a higher incidence of ASC in our community than perhaps, you know, there might be if you were to take a sample from a different, you know, unless, you know, it was one of those communities that
People
cross
want to
over.
ask you what
So,
that
autistic spectrum condition. So I think we do have a higher number of people who have autism or who would meet the diagnostic criteria for autism within our community. There's no hard research on that. That is a personal opinion. But it is mine. And I think you'd probably find that in some other communities as well. I think it was Dragon Week this weekend, and you know, look at World Top Gaming and other communities that attract people. But I think we really do. And in those communities, flexibility can be difficult. So again, if we know ourselves, if we know flexibility is difficult, and we are going to play in an environment, it might be that you only play at home because you can't tolerate the fact that there are too many unknowns, and that's okay too. But if we're going to say, okay, we're going to play outside in the community, and we know that, you know, there might be a clusterfuck, or there might be a situation that occurs outside of our control. We're quite rigid and we're quite inflexible as human beings, but these are 2 or 3 things that potentially work for me, rather than this is how I work. You
Yeah.
try and broaden that out a little bit, and that's hard, but that's a piece of work that you say, okay, I want to keep it controlled. This is how in an ideal world what it would look like. But if our scene's interrupted, and if we can't do that, do you know what? Actually, we're going to leave. That's going to be the next thing that we're going to do, or this is going to be the next thing. And we talk about those and we plan for those, and eventually there becomes more known unknowns, if that makes sense, and we can broaden that out. But you know, we talk about words like flexibility like it's easy, and it's really not. You know,
No,
it's
really
okay
not.
for it not to be. Be human, be absolutely human. I'm a huge fan of being radically candid. You know, I'm a massive fan of radical candid with ourselves, with other
I'm
people, and ultimately, you know, it's okay. This was a clusterfuck. It is okay. Things are not going to allow things to not be perfect sometimes, and that is okay.
She says after spending an extra grand on fucking law.
I think you touched on something that's really important as well, and that's personal reflection.
Yes.
So when you have something like that, you know, just make a note, journal it, or whatever it is you do.
If
and
you,
reflect.
the circles of control are really important. You cannot control something, it's the weather, situations. You can have an influence on something. So what can I do here to influence that? Well, in the future, I'll maybe have a word with the venue. I talked about DM. I say what it was like, and maybe I also then understand that actually that play wasn't allowed. Maybe I didn't know. Maybe someone else complained about it. There are things, but what I can control, my response to things, my emotions, how I am. And people say, no, I can't. Yes, you can. You've got to learn how and understand where you're coming from, and it impacts both of those scenarios.
Hey, there's events I won't go back to. It might just be that you choose that I'm not going to return to that event. You know, that event's not, and that's okay
It's
too.
happened to me like
Yeah, and that's
at that same event.
that's fine. you
Not
know.
by DMs, but that
Yeah.
was a
But
very
then when do we make that decision and
space-related
learn?
thing, yeah.
Like, at what point? We were written to just before last night by a couple of people, and somebody actually wrote a DM to me. I'm so glad you're running events because I know I will be safe there. And I wrote back saying, fuck me, do not even assume that.
You're safe until you allow yourself.
You that is down to you. We have 2 nappy changing rooms that are completely private, and they're locked doors. And you've got 10 minutes each roughly, and there's like, we put comfort out, we put pillows out, we've got changing mats, all space themed. And like, because perfectionism, I go a bit overboard. But what's interesting is if you assume that you meet someone there and you think you're just going to go up and it might be okay, don't fucking put that on me. Accountability comes in. we will do our best. I
And I
mean,
think
we're very
there's a com-
subtle.
Yeah, I think there's a compliment there, isn't there? That we know
Yeah.
this will be quality, but equally safety, you know, and that's, you know, you talk about the circle that you have around you, the people that you have around you, you need to vet that. And so, and it is, sometimes it is just, I am not going to. And what I see a lot of, unfortunately, is people who really feel stuck in this place of disempowerment. And if something happens at an event and this is a pattern and I've not enjoyed it and there's been something outside of my control, absolutely there's an issue there. But also the power is, well, I'm not going to go there again. I'm gonna take control of that. And I think sometimes we get stuck in the position of feeling quite disempowered as a community. You know, and we have choices.
Just to that,
Yeah.
my other question was going to be just on that is, how do you find, and I don't know if motivation is the right word, but how do you pick yourself up from that when you're feeling so low? And it's not because you've got a job, it's not because of this, it's because, you know, I've had to move back in with my mum, so I don't have a private space right now where I can play. You know, we've all got lives that are just, can be shit shows or great, depending on what's going on. But how do you keep yourself, probably similar to dating, how do you keep yourself wanting to have those conversations and moving forward
And it's a really similar
to something that
it's
you enjoy?
It's a really big fucking question. That
Yeah,
is
sorry.
But it's fine. But then the question is ultimately, how do I cope? Which is really interesting because the question will not be the same answer for everybody in this room. You know, we sit here and we identify as having ADHD, both of us. So what motivates us, what our drive is, you know, I could give you the meme answer. I could say, you know, there's 4 things that drive us. One of them's competition, one of it's novelty, one is it. You know, what drives you as a human being will be very, very different. But it's still kind of similar question to what was asked earlier on in terms of having a knowledge and an understanding of yourself. And you know what? It's all right to not be all right for a period of time. It's all right to feel, look, I am burnt out, I'm at rock bottom, I don't feel good, I'm not in a bad place. Unfortunately, there's not been 1 clusterfuck, there's been 3 clusterfucks in a series of a week, and that has dented me, and I'm going through this process of loss. We all lose ourselves, we lose our identity. I recently had a hysterectomy and I'm lost a little bit of that knowledge of who I am in terms of sexuality. That's okay. It's a process that you go through. How do you manage that? I don't know. I spend too much money on those spas. You know, what do you do? But I think there's things that we can do and we can have around us that support us in that. So I'm a huge, the 5 closest people around you have a huge influence of who you are as a human being. Choose fucking wisely. That's the first thing, you know, little things like that in terms of what can we really, really do. If you need to seek support, You know, of course, I'm going to say things like talking to people can help. That's what I do for a living. I'd be ridiculous. Talking to professional people who will understand absolutely is a good thing to do. Do we always need to do that? No, of course we don't. Can it be helpful? Absolutely can. But how you manage and how you cope when things are difficult, you know, it might be that actually you manage in a way that's not particularly helpful. You know, some maladaptive coping going on. And that's okay. If you've got somebody around you who's going to call that out, you know, that friend's valuable. So that's really, really difficult. But ultimately, we all get to the stage where to thrive, we have to pick ourselves up again. We have to. And it's hard.
And we have to accept where we are. So acceptance is one of the keys, because if you are in this place and you start to say, it's not fair, look at my life, it's like, hey, we are on a drama triangle, and the drama triangle is victim, rescuer, and persecutor. And we can feel empowered in different ways about ourselves, with others, and different things. So acceptance, and I'm still going to go back to a really old writing I did about we're going on a bear hunt. You can't go under it, you can't go around it, you've got to go through it. And how do you make choices about that? And realise that actually every little thing you do actually could be empowering. If you choose to sleep differently, if you choose to wake up, if you choose, it's so easy, much easier said than done. So actually what things will empower you? Motivation, it's a fucking awful phrase. It's not a handbag that you pick up and it's there. It's a little bit about something that you do every day. But in order to do that, it needs acceptance. You need to work out what does motivate me, how and why. Am I neurodiverse? Is it competition? Is it power? What is it about this that I can help myself with?
Sometimes there's others as well. I'm a huge big fan of compassion as well. So I work with people who are very stuck for a very long time quite often. So they have pervasive grief and they're really, really stuck. And the reality is, you know, compassion, self-compassion is such a powerful tool. We use it all the time in my line of work. But being a compassionate other, any of these things, if you're living for other people and again not taking personal responsibility, and you're stuck there and your whole life is
Be your
service,
compassionate other.
but you can be your own compassionate other, or you can compassion, you know, acts. We were talking
Do you know
about
what compassionate? The people know what compassion is.
So compersion is this feeling of enjoyment that you get almost vicariously. So the enjoyment of other people's enjoyment can be really healthy. It can also lead to some unhealthy behaviour. But like everything else, it's about balance, it's about measure. So, you know, if you're having a really, really difficult Christmas, you know, going and helping out somewhere, you know, in a homeless shelter or a soup kitchen, that's great. Would you go and do that every fucking Christmas for the rest of your days? No, you wouldn't. But this can actually be really, really active, you know, of contribution. We know contribution is really valuable. It's really good for mental health.
Alongside compassion comes comparing. We all compare. So you say, I used to have this, now I have this. And it's not fair. It's not okay. What we don't do, especially on social media, it really is a classic. When we look at things, we don't compare down. You don't look at what you've got. And actually, I will always advocate as well. One thing I say to some of my clients, some of the time is print out 7 boxes. Print out 7 boxes and split them into 24 hours. Pick your favourite colour for positivity. Pick a colour you like for neutrality. Pick a colour you don't like for negativity or bad. Although check your perception of good and bad, because that is a perception. And if we turn around and you start to colour in, and let's say you start at midnight and you're asleep till 6, is that positive or neutral? That depends on your answer as to who you are in the room. Let me tell you, that's fucking positive. A lot of people don't sleep. People in neurodivergent don't sleep. People with sleep issues don't sleep. Some people have 3 jobs and get 4 hours. Some people are in permanent pain. Some people have terrible situations. So actually sleep is fucking positive. You waking up and getting out of your bed is fucking positive. You can fucking stand up for a start. Or maybe you can't, you're in a chair and you can still move, you can still do things. There is a hot shower, there is a bed, you can open your window. It's really interesting to actually look back. It's positive. Did you eat breakfast? What was that like? Could you? Did you have your shower? Did you get ready for work? Have you got a job? No, look at that. It all feels really negative. Whereas actually, yeah, okay, I don't want to be Kim Kardashian. I wouldn't mind her money though. Because we all think that money will change everything. No, it won't. I earn really well. It doesn't change a fucking thing. It's all about how it is for you. And I was just talking actually upstairs, funny enough, about it's how we perceive things of now I'm not independent, now I haven't got this. And are you looking at what you have got? Are you looking at you are in shelter? Yeah, you might argue with your mum, you are cared for, you can do this. This might just be temporary. It might not be, it might last a while. Are you looking at the okayness of what's happening to you as well as that comparison? You seem really upset now, so I hope I'm not upsetting you too much. So it's really important to understand what you have got. I talk about bricks and feathers as a life hack. Your brain is conditioned, so your nervous system, you're very old, that part of your brain, the limbic system, is designed to look for negativity because it keeps you alive. So we pick up bricks, they're easy to pick up. You can fucking smack someone in the bollocks with it or their face or whatever. It's very impactful. We can find it in a bag, it's easy. It's much harder, and I always start with what weighs more, a ton of bricks or a ton of feathers. I cannot see what a ton of feathers looks like. Is that 12 warehouses? Are they vacuum packed? How much do I allow? How much do I allow for the weight of the fucking plastic? And then it's just ridiculous, but it's still a ton of feathers, but I can't envision it. Your brain is designed just to pick up negativity. It's a brick. It's easy. Actually, I even have, and I genuinely mean this, that's my screensaver, it's got feathers on. I want to look for the positivity every day and appreciate and be grateful, because that changes your brain structure as well, for what I've got. I am waking up okay. I am safe. I do have a bed. But we all think it should be more. So we're comparing up to what we used to have, what everyone else has got. And we were talking before about the different pillars, weren't we, of relationships and things. Of, oh, it's got to be about money. No, it's not. It's about, I care for, she's like my best friend. I really care for her. I know she loves a coffee. I just driven her husband to Brighton and back. Didn't go past the Starbucks. That's always her call. But there's a new independent coffee shop open around the corner. I've got a coffee machine at home. I know an act of care for this human in my life is, and whether we're talking about aftercare or not, is I went around the corner to the shop. I got a Starbucks order. I mean, you try asking in a normal coffee shop for wet and extra hot. They think you're fucking weird. However, brought a coffee home. It might not be the coffee that's perfect for her, but it's still an act of care. What are you getting? Like, you might argue with your mum, but she might have cooked you something. You might think she's a complete cunt, And maybe we have problems with the way we've been brought up and we put a lot of stuff in that. It all influences, and it is also about what have I got? And I wonder whether you even look at that every day. What is okay?
I think we've got one here and one here.
So
Yeah.
just when-
Sorry, I kind of.
I know, actually, I know you asked. I'll come
Yeah,
back
what
to
from
your
earlier I was just saying when you talk about clubs, you know, are they safe to go to? It's like one or two clubs ask people to vouch for each other, for instance. I've been asked one or two events to vouch for people that are on my friends list, and it's like, well, I don't want to be responsible. You might be on my friends list, but am I going to actually stand up and go, I'd be happy to vouch for that person?
I won't vouch for another human being. I don't know you when you're under stress. I don't stand. I recommend Poppy. She's the only other therapist I recommend because I know how she works and we think very alike. So someone who likes me, they're going to like her. And often I don't always have space. I am very, very, very booked up in advance. Not always, it varies. I'm going to recommend her, but to recommend somebody to be in a relationship or to play with, fuck off. Or a club. I think half the clubs in the UK are about what you look like, how slim you are, what colour you are, and what you bring to it as an image. And I'm like, fuck me if that's all you care about.
And it's perception, isn't it? I mean, I've been around for 20 years. You could get messages of people who say that event is by and large going to be a safe event because it's run by these human beings, and that's lovely. I get there's a compliment in there. We've talked about that, but then that's nice. It's nice to hear that. But the reality is, you could also speak to the person that I spent 10 years with in this senior community who I had children with who aren't with no more. Actually, that relationship's okay, but I guarantee you they're not going to give you the same endorsement of you as a human being as this person. Yeah? So who am I putting in front of you? And which version of me did they know? You know, I've spent a lifetime here, so have you. You know, which version are we even given an opinion of? Which change? So I think it's you know, ultimately it's very, very dangerous to kind of be in a position where our personal judgment has to be our personal judgment. This is what I'm saying. Which version of anybody do we, you know, compare ourselves, look at yourself, you know, you look at yourself 10 years ago, 5 years ago, pre the last relationship that changed you. You know, we're all very, very different people.
Why do you think I'm deleting on my fucking Facebook?
Yeah. And do we allow people to grow as well? Because equally, I
Yeah,
think
and
we're so stuck on somebody else's opinion of somebody else, you know, and I think that matters, don't get me wrong, but I also think you have to allow people to show us who they are.
And also, like, how much do we forgive people, include people? What do we do? So my supervisor is Dominic, who runs Pink Therapy, and he's very sweet and very, like, I don't really know what you're getting from this. This is your area of expertise. And he asked me things as well. And he sent me a thing the other day where somebody's setting up some kind of action whereby if we have a perpetrator on the scene, that they are given 6 sessions of therapy in order, maybe through like kink friendly or whatever that means, in order to I don't know what they're after, but somehow, like, I get this all the time. Can you see this person because they've done something wrong, and then can you kind of tick them off? No, I fucking can't. And anyone who does that will have to be pretty mental. I'm often asked, could you see this person? They broke someone else's trust. They did this. I'm going to piss someone off because actually sometimes things are clusterfucks. Sometimes things are toxic. No one is to blame. It just is the chemistry and the connection. Sometimes it is abuse. Sometimes it's misunderstandings, and somebody's misunderstanding is somebody else's abuse. And it gets really, really messy. And to think that all of a sudden, I run a workshop here called Clear on Consent and Kink. It's the COC workshop. But it's all about consent. But actually, if you really ask me what I think of consent, I have a very different personal opinion to what I teach. I actually don't really think it exists as such. You can only consent to what you truly know. And you don't know how you're going to react. You don't know everything that's going to happen, like we were saying about the drop. And we really need to make sure if someone says, oh yeah, you're going to give me a good caning, like what type? Are we talking about Singapore level caning and you're pinned down and I've just made 43 stripes on your ass that are all broken and bleeding everywhere? Or are we talking about something light and gentle? It's all about perception and understanding. It's so important, like fucking
Life's
words.
a series of best guesses.
Yeah,
That is essentially what life is. You know?
And you wanted to say,
So you said something that caught me by surprise, and I just want to know what you meant by it. You said compassion can sometimes lead to negative behaviours.
Oh, absolutely. So if you live your life vicariously for the reaction and the response of other people, you see it quite often in relationships that have a transfer of authority. If ultimately you are always putting your needs secondary to somebody else, or if you ultimately you know, your enjoyment is a result of another person's enjoyment, what happens is you create codependency eventually. And that's what, so a series of thoughts and behaviours of that nature layered upon each other for long enough will create an unhealthy attachment and codependent relationship.
And they can
Is
also, it's mine too. We know this. So like, it can also create manipulation. So like, for me as a cut queen, I want my partner to go and fuck other people.
Yeah.
I don't want to find them for him. Yeah, but I want him to go and fuck other people.
Question.
Sorry?
What was the question?
Oh, how does compulsion lead to
Something negative.
something negative?
How can it?
So as a cut queen, I want my partner to go and be with somebody and fuck somebody else, or to come up and tell me about it. I get compulsion from it, but more than that, I love the humiliation and degradation. But the other thing I love really massively is that they choose me again afterwards. There's lots and lots of layers of reasons for this, and you've got to understand yourself all of that. However, what I'm aware of is sometimes if an opportunity presents itself, I could potentially, because I want that, I want your joy in some way, really it's my joy too. We have to understand and own it, that I could potentially manipulate or try and make that happen even more. So it is about understanding that sometimes we think we're being lovely and compulsion can become manipulative as well. And
You can make yourself very small.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. And it's about
So, if I just,
Yeah.
it's an interesting concept.
Yeah.
I thought I understood.
don't ever come to our work.
So, the interpretation, I just want to get clear in my head. So, it is still theoretically possible, based on what you say, to have mutual conversion that still takes you both into a spiral of destruction.
I think over a long enough
Possibly.
period of time, I think if it's mutual and it's understood and it's consented and it's negotiated, there's a far less likelihood that you're going to end up where I'm talking about.
Right.
You know, but I think like anything else, too much of anything is not a good thing. And I think that applies here as well. And we sometimes have this idea that, you know, compersion or submissiveness, for lack of a better word, you know, ultimately the more the better. The same with S&M to some degree. And in actual fact, I think even with compersion, too much of a good thing is actually you're in danger of whose interest am I actually serving? And if you persistently are serving somebody else's interest,
Do you think it's still commercial when you get to that point? Then? Do you think that's, or is it turned into something else?
I think that's what it's potentially turned into, manipulation, because my needs matter. You won't see that difference, and it's really hard to reflect on.
how and when do you identify that?
When
How
did
do you
it
know
slip?
it's that switch?
So yeah, it is
in it, even when you're talking about it, even we're struggling to pin it down, yeah? Imagine being in the context of a complicated relationship and looking at that.
In my head, I'm just oversimplifying it, and I just because the only metaphor I can think of right now is cocaine. I don't do cocaine at all, but it sounded like you're saying that you want more of something, and that you become addicted to that thing, and then you essentially.
Or
I
dependent
think
as well.
that can be quite, I think dependent,
Yeah.
but I think quite often that's more with the acts of, let's say BDSM, I think more and more, or when it looks at control, or it looks at ritualistic behaviour, to feel that I am controlled, the act has to be bigger and bigger and bigger, and that I think is very much like cocaine. I think compersion is, another kind of arena you could transfer it to that might be identifiable with some people, maybe not, but I guess that area of parenthood. How often are we given the message from society that to be a good parent or a better parent or the best parent, you martyr yourself to this concept of? I can tell you, if you persistently put the needs of your children above you at every step, that is not going to be a healthy household for anybody, right? And that's one example that I can give.
And you are creating your children to be martyrs, to be selfish with your children sometimes. Like my kids would ask me when they're a bit older, can you get me at 2 o'clock in the morning? Can I fuckers like, it's really late, I'm up at 6, I start work at 7, I will get you at 12. That's what's good for me. Guess what my kids are going to then do later? They are going to look after themselves. It's not a selfish thing you're teaching, it's about too much selflessness, too much desire. And joy and compassion and that, they really matter.
Yeah.
However, if COVID taught us this, if you depend on someone else to make you happy, how many people here had a really hard time during COVID with lockdown, with like being left alone, with not having human contact, or having less, or being forced into human contact with one person or two, or the wrong people, which is what Christmas can be about, or other holidays can be about. It's if I depend on somebody else in order to make me happy, what do I do then?
I think I got it. I think it's your rationale behind the conversion is whether the problem is it's a
Yeah.
thing that feeds yourself and you're doing it for the wrong reason. Whereas if your objective is not to feed your happiness, but there's a positive side effect, that there's a mutual gain, then that's good conversion. If it becomes a dependency drug, and that's the only way you get your joy, then it potentially becomes bad.
Yeah, and I guess the takeout is to appraise that, to always be in a relationship where there is that open, honest communication to come together and say, look, this is how things are. And I think sometimes we don't. Again, I'm the same. I'm in a relationship. But how often do we come together and we really understand and appraise and talk about? That's why if we're doing couples work, we always talk about the radar concept and the ability to do that.
So I
And
know
think
what the
it's
radar
important.
concept is. So like it comes from polyamory. So the idea is like
It's not just
who here is no, it's not. Who here is employed, for example? Do you have an appraisal every year?
Oh,
There you go. Did you read the contract you fucking signed?
I changed
Some
mine.
do. I know you change yours. Some do, some don't. But the point is, what you're supposed to do every so often is have an appraisal of where you are and where you're going, because that's good, isn't it? For a relationship, you understand.
It's supposed to be motivating.
But well, I don't know. Does it? It's what I think. Some things that are really difficult aren't necessarily motivating, but fuck me, do we grow from them and learn from them, and then we can build when someone's been honest for a change or shared a feeling or work is slightly different. So they can be motivating, but often we're given a shit sandwich. This is great, change this is great, which is, I did an MBA and I've worked in that field as well. So, those sort of things are important. We do talk about positivity, but we also need to learn how to give feedback. We bought a cake. I bought a cake actually for Planet Poppy Cake. I spent 140 quid on this cunting cake. I very much gave her inspiration. She showed me an idea and I got sent a picture of this cake. And I was like, I looked at this cake and I was like, oh, fuck me, I'm so disappointed. And I said, that's not the sky, it's the sea. And you just cut out paper and stuck it on. And actually, I'm not okay with this. Her reactions were interesting. I was dealing with her reactions and we ended up on a phone call. And it's my job there to be really calm. She could not hear the feedback. And actually, I'm paying £140. I was not happy with what I got. And what's frustrating is I knew I could do better. So I just didn't have the time. So we spoke about it quite a lot. She just couldn't hear that I wasn't okay with it. Well, I'm tired, I've got a headache, and I've got 2 children, and I'm there thinking, I don't give a flying fuck. Don't offer the service then. I am paying for this. This is the service. Give me what I want. And they're driving down. I've gone to get this cake, and I've taken it home, and Poppy thinks we're just going to change it a bit or maybe do something. Oh,
I
no.
had all these ideas of how we could, take the paper off, put some biscuits on it.
I've stripped the whole fucking cake, and I've
I've got
started
icing on it. It's completely stripped.
And I don't need to be funny, but I made a much better cake. And it did look amazing, and it was all about the moon, and it had astronauts and planets on it and everything. I fucking loved it, and it was much better. But probably, fuck me, the work it took. And let's go back to radar. So it's about how we also give good clarity. Honesty really matters, and people are very uncomfortable with that. So a radar is like an assessment in work, but it's an assessment of where you are in your relationship on a regular basis. I absolutely recommend to my clients, if they do this sort of meeting, that they don't sit opposite each other and they don't sit side by side. One of my favorite things is they sit on the corner and they hold their hands out and they even talk like this. It's much harder to say, you're a fucking cunt.
Takes practice, obviously.
It takes a lot of time to do that. It's much better, because if you go back to really old styles of hunter-gatherers and providers and different things, how we spoke really matters. And we can say, your brain is much better than that. It isn't always. So just that corner talk can make a real difference. And the idea is we have a look at what are we going to talk about today? What does that look like? We have accountability in it. What is it we want from the relationship? How are we doing? What does this mean?
Set an agenda. If you've got a house where you can set an agenda on the fridge, set it on the fridge. Some people, don't. But we know there's no surprises. We know what we're going to talk about. We're able to talk about the things that have been difficult. in the context of we allow a little bit of time to then bring them to the table. We're not throwing them like Costa stamps or so things that build up in the
Do
context
you know
of a
what Costa
relationship.
stamps are?
Every time there's somebody just like pisses us off, we get a stamp in our Costa book, and then the next time I have an argument, we chuck the whole book, these all things that you do. You know, avoid that kind of behaviour. We're that's
Don't ever reach 10.
We're able. Don't ask what you get free at 10. But no, you ultimately get to decide what it is you're going to talk about, and that can be helpful for lots of reasons. Like I say, no surprises. You know, we're able to reflect on what we're bringing. The other thing about Radar, reason I like that whole concept of it, is because of that last R. So that idea of that actually, when we come together and be vulnerable, we're trying to create a space in this relationship where it's psychologically safe, more about psychological safety. And that last R is about how do we reconnect? How do we reconnect as a couple or as play partners or even as friends? We've had this argument, you know, you have nowhere to live and you've come and moved in for a week, and actually you've been far more difficult to live with than I ever envisaged, and the relationship's fractured, and my God, you know, you don't wash the pots after you've used them, you know, whatever it might be. This has now endangered our connection. How do we reconnect? And I think it's really important to recognise that that's an important part of maintaining any kind of interaction with somebody that we care about. So I always recommend having that in the context of any relationship, to be honest.
It's like taking terms. Yeah. I can't always remember it perfectly, but it is Radar. It is about your agenda. No, it is.
Well, we
It is
can all
everything
Google it.
we've spoken about without the right words. It is absolutely that. But there is also an aspect of it I really advocate that isn't in there, which is about if you want something, what's that going to look like?
I
What
found the
time
acronym
is-
if you want to know what it is.
Yeah.
Yes, go on.
So the R is for review.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The A is for the agree the agenda. The D is for discuss.
Yeah.
The A is for action points.
Yeah.
And the R is for reconnect.
So you would
yeah.
you wouldn't review your first one. So literally like the process. So your first one's review. This is what we said we were going to do last
Last
time.
time.
We've done it. Yeah.
And that's why I really believe on the action points. It's the same with work. Have a date by it or a guide. Have a responsibility by it of someone. How many times I saw this guy in September, quite a few years ago, 5 actually. So it was this time 5 years ago. Start seeing this guy. He was very honest about that he has erection difficulties and depression. I don't have a problem with either of those. What I do have a problem with is if you're not going to fucking step up and try and do something about them. So I said, action points. I said, do you think in the next 3 months that while we're seeing each other, because like he couldn't talk past 7 because he would put himself to bed, all sorts of things like that. Do you think it's fair, and I want your opinion on this, I was saying to him that maybe within is like 12 to 15 weeks okay to say that maybe you found someone to talk to, that you get some help with this stuff. And he said, absolutely, that's a really good idea. I mean, let's not go into why we've done it before and everything else as well. This is an opportunity. We hit New Year's Eve. I'm diagnosed with breast cancer. I don't know whether I'm going to live or die at this point. I knew I needed surgery, which completely fucked me coming up to going to your wedding. Sat there New Year's Eve making her a jacket. So, it fucks up your life, doesn't it? I knew I didn't know then, but I was going to go through chemo and everything else as well. And he was there between Christmas and New Year for a few days when I got the rest of the news that you would definitely need surgery. And then it became, even after that, it's everywhere. It's all in your lymph nodes. You're going to have to do something about it. Max chemo. And I was looking at him and he hadn't done something in that day that he promised he was going to do. Promise. Big word, a promise. And I sort of looked and I was like, right. December, September, October, November, December, just over 3 months. Okay, so you haven't done that. I need to go and feed my daughter's cats. I'll come with you. No, but you really need to make this phone call. That's what you told me you need to do today and you haven't. You've avoided it. And I just thought, do you know what? Fuck. How's the search for the therapist? I'm sorry, it does not take 3 months to find a therapist. It does not. If you really want this, it doesn't. Well, I'm not sure if I need one. I don't know what I need right now. From my perspective, I said, do you know what? I'm really sorry, but I need you to go upstairs. I need you to pack and I need you to leave. We're done. Now, a lot of people don't hold a boundary. I'll come back to that one in a second. A boundary isn't something that you can set on somebody else. If you don't do that, you've got to do that. That's not a fucking boundary. That's a request. That's a preference. You're asking for something. A boundary is what you will hold. So you can't say to someone, you need to do this, otherwise this. no, a boundary is if you don't do that, I know I'm gone. I'm not okay with that, so I will act. But what I see in a lot of relationships is people holding these things called boundaries when nothing fucking changes and happens because it's just so interesting. So I said, I need you to go. And he's like, you can't be fucking serious. I am. I asked you to do something. It was conditional. You're just proving today that that's not something you want to do. I'm about to go through a major life change. My life is going to be really hard. I've watched my sister go through chemo twice. She's in palliative care. She has been for 20 something years. So I was like, which is a bit crazy, but she was only supposed to live 3 months, and 20 years later, she's still very alive, bald and very alive. It's the truth. Yeah. So, and it was really interesting because I said, no, I really need you to go. He looked bereft and sad, and was like, why? And I said, his next phrase was, but I'm going to look after you. And I went, you cannot look after yourself. I do not need another child to look after. I have 4 daughters. I have a lot going on. I need to look after me. That was my boundary, that consequence. And that comes into a radar. Be careful about what you say and what it looks like, because you've got to see it through. It's like with a child. If you're always saying things like, if you do that again, I'm going to fucking adopt you through social services to someone else, or I'm going to flush your head down the toilet. It's the same with dominance, isn't it? When you think about it, if you don't do this, this is going to happen. If it never happens, guess what? The relationship starts to crumble. So those action points are really important. And then I was wrapping some presents and doing something, and he sort of stood at the door like this. And he's like, are you serious? I'm like, yeah, I'm really sorry, I am serious. I'm not sorry for me. This is the right decision for me. I understand it's hurtful to you and you had a chance to act differently. I'm out.
And one thing I will say, we use a lot of things and we use a lot of terms quite repetitively, which like demortem, post-mortem, here's user manuals. And one of the things that a lot of people say is read your writings, when it comes to workshops, I understand what you're saying, but the how. I really struggle with the how, the actual, tell me the how to do these things. And that's interesting. Sometimes that's the psychology where somebody is in terms of wanting support through that process. But I think radar, the reason that, and I do use it a lot, I'm just not good with reference. But the thing that I really, really like with radar as well is it's something that you can do in and of itself. It's brilliant as a relationship tool. But I think to do it individually, if what you're saying is, actually, I really struggle with reflection, I wouldn't know where to start with a Haynes user manual. I don't know what it is that I want. I'm feeling a little bit lost. I'm feeling a little bit stuck. Where do I? That's not me. Like, some of us are very reflective as people, some of us less so. If it's something that you do struggle with, start there. You don't have to be in a relationship to use the principle of radar. You can say, right, what's that I've got? I know what I want in 12 months. We've talked about it. I know what that looks like, and I know what my reconnect is. My reward is I'm going to do this piece of work and I'm going to do it from a spa. I'm going to reconnect with myself, and if I've got a bit of money, I'll have a massage, and if I don't, I'll be in the hot tub. But I tell you what, it'll be lovely. Be blissful. But you know what I mean? These are things that you can do.
Amazon boxes.
We don't have to wait to start these pieces of work. I hear that a lot from people. Well, I've not found the right person yet, or this is the barrier, or I'm not going to events, I'm only going to munches there, or I'm not. Do it now. Do it for you. Do it with you. Do these things independently. I can't do that because my partner doesn't want to do that. Well, why aren't you doing it? You do it. You do it. They might do it with you. They might not. But you do it.
Does it almost come down to like a self-worth or self-esteem issue?
Absolutely.
I find myself setting boundaries and saying I'm going to do the thing, and then
Wait a second, you're not
Yeah.
setting a boundary. I'm sorry.
Sorry.
If you no,
But then you're not, because
that's
you're
the piece
still
here.
you're still then trying to, like, you fall back into old habits or old
Do you know,
patterns.
yeah, do you know what you're doing? You're
rather
screaming.
than sorry.
No, sorry, I just need to talk to you. But what happens is we scream preferences into voids and we call them boundaries. That's ultimately what we do.
You're not setting a boundary. Because if you mean a boundary, you're gone. Or it changes.
And it's
We don't mean it.
fucking hard, and there's loads of circumstances around us that means it's difficult. To be able to maintain that and to follow through, in some ways, is a privilege. We are privileged, and we've worked really fucking hard for that. And there's lots of things in terms of resilience, in terms of resources, in terms of everything, right? But the reality is, if you're in a place and you have screamed your preferences and you have boundaries and they're not respected and you feel really, really stuck, that's the time where I say, look, maybe you can't do it, though. Maybe it is time to look at someone, to look at therapy, look at that kind of thing. We can sit here and give you all the tools and say these are really helpful things to be able to do, either on your own and in a relationship. But if you're really, really stuck there and nothing changes and there's a huge amount of unhappiness, then I think that's the time where you say, okay, how do I?
Of course, it's about how you value yourself and yourself.
Everything is.
You're fine. It's all about Can you go around that way? Thank you. It's all about how you value yourself. Look, I think it can be really dangerous to be in the BDSM world if you do not value yourself quite highly. It's really dangerous. Someone will take advantage. Someone will manipulate. Even more so if you're neurodiverse. Let's say you have rejection sensitivity dysphoria. And you'll also find that a lot of us are real people pleasers. And then you lose yourself in that. Where are your boundaries? How is it okay for you to be treated? One of the little tricks I use if you want to how is I grab my phone and I look through it. And this doesn't work for everyone. It works for some people. And I go all the way to the top and I find this particular picture. This is a picture of me and my sister. I won't show my sister. We're only 5 years old with a dog. I won't show her because she's fucking dressed the same as me. Let's not talk about my weakness. Right, so there's this sweet little girl, right? She's very little. She's sitting there with a dog. She's sweet. She's young. I've got a privacy screen on, so I understand it's really hard to see sometimes. She's just this little blonde, blue-eyed sweetness of vulnerability. My rule becomes, if I wouldn't do it to her and I wouldn't say it to her, why am I allowing me to treat myself like this or others? And that comes to food, alcohol, regulation, structure. You wouldn't let, I mean, clearly we're not talking about sex with a 5-year-old. It's about treatment. It's about, why do I accept that? Because we aren't linear. What's happened to you isn't linear. You didn't leave it behind. We're like tree rings. So again, let's go bingo. We've got genetics, we've got epigenetics, we've got in utero experience. Your eggs were in your grandmother. You were in your grandmother. There's so much cellular memory and all these things that happen as we grow. It's amazing how we grow and who we are. You don't leave her behind. She is a massive part of you that influences how you are today. And then people say, but I can't change that. I can't do anything about that. Yes, you can in the here and now. The way you talk to yourself is the way you talk to her. Him, them, doesn't matter. Don't care if you're a fucking kitten, meow. Like, that's how you talk to each other. You wouldn't treat your dog sometimes the way you fucking put up with stuff. If you can't do self-esteem, borrow your own child's. I bet if you said some of that stuff and you looked at a picture of yourself when you were vulnerable and 5 years old, you wouldn't do half the stuff or accept what's being said, would you? No.
And it's value, and I think that comes into therapy quite a lot. I mean, obviously, I appreciate there is a conflict here as we both are in the living the way that we do. But I always find it being interesting when people come into my therapy space and their perception of value. So, you know, I charge X amount, and I don't necessarily think my X amount is that high for what I offer. But a lot of people say, I can't afford therapy, that's really, really expensive, that's outside of my, you know,
not fair.
Means of accessibility is not fair. And I get, you know, the NHS is really, really flawed, and I understand that. But for some people, they'll come in and their perception of it is very, very different. But equally, some of those same people who say this is inaccessible to me will have a £300 flogger, or they will have a £100 flogger, or they will have a, and it's what do you value and how do you value it? And I think sometimes that side of it, which is why I guess these work started in the first place, is very, very much undervalued. So, you know, I think that's really important when we think about, actually, does all this boil down to how we feel about ourselves? Yes, of course it does. And if that's something that we need some support with, the fact that we're not even accessing that, what does that tell us in terms of how we're valuing and prioritising ourselves? It goes back to a little bit of what I was saying earlier on about, you know, it can't always be about us. There has to become a point where you prioritise yourself as well.
It's not selfish.
No.
Like, selflessness is actually fucking really not okay. It's all about extremes, isn't it? It's about fundamental. A fundamental liberalist is just as dangerous as a fundamental right-winger.
Yeah.
But we see the right-winger, you know, the Hitler, the Nazi, the Ku Klux Klan extremity as really dangerous. That fundamental liberalist is just as dangerous because it's all about what I believe. The answer is always somewhere swinging in the middle. I always say, even if I'm on Facebook, which I'm not because I'm deleting everything, my kids were really shocked when Trump came in because they're pretty leftist like I am. And I really believe in people's empowerment and everything else. I say, like, oh my God, that's because you're surrounded by people who think and are like, I need to follow some strange right-wingers in order to get a middle ground perception of what's really going on. I don't want to and I'm not going to. So I have to understand that my version is skewed, but also my version of me is skewed. We look back with so many biases. We look back with all that's happened to us and how that influences us. And often, a lot of submissives especially can be people pleasers. They will go out of their way. They are pretty neurodiverse. They do have rejection sensitivity dysphoria. They're really worried about what someone's going to think of them. And we base our value in being a human doing instead of being a human being. And that's so fundamental. Your value isn't in what you do or what you've got, it's in who you are. But that is not the way our society works at all. So it's always a contradiction to that. Coming off social media, understanding your own value, being reflective, being accountable is actually what makes you happier. But fuck that, we all want the latest pair of bucks, or we want the handbag, or we want the car, or we want the something, and there is no value in that. There is value, but not for you as a human being. Your no, your yes is really important. What are you saying yes to? What are you saying no to? And that is a boundary. A boundary is, this is unacceptable, therefore I will go. When I work with couples and thruples, I work on something called bronzes, silvers, and golds. It's my concept of what are the rules in our relationship, and Radar comes into this. We discuss what a bronze rule is. It could be don't leave the toilet seat up if you're with someone. It could be don't put it down. It could be why is that coffee cup never in the fucking dishwasher, you cunt? There can be small things. And then it goes up to how do we communicate, how we're willing to be together, and it goes into gold. And the golds are interesting. I remember working with a couple years ago who said her goal, she said, we've just got to the end of this session. They're literally getting married the week after. And one of her goals was you can't sleep with anybody else. It was the end of the session. I said, we need to come back to this one. It doesn't work as a gold, which she was quite shocked about. Lots of reasons why it cannot work. He went to his stag do. She went to her hen do. Heterosexual couple, been together since they were 13 years old. Never slept with anybody else, just been together. I mean, it's Disney, isn't it? For fuck's sake. So
He had clients like that.
he then goes into this do. Interestingly, I felt a little like, oh, this discombobulates me a bit, because actually most pole dancers aren't sex workers. However, this particular one was given a couple of £100 by his brother to fuck him. No consent from his perspective. Now he is pissed as arseholes. He hasn't really got a full erection. He's only semi. She jumps, she gets it out, she jumps on him, she's up and down 5 times. He's pushed her off, vomited on the side, run home to his wife, both my clients, really upset. Her gold is no longer valid, is it? It can't be. That wasn't of his free will. It's a rape. However you look at it, that is rape. His brother set it up. What's interesting, I'm not going to go into how we work with everything else as well, but at the end of the day, where we eventually got to, her goals then became, your brother's a cunt, he's not coming to the wedding. He will not be in our lives until he's proved that he understands more about us as human beings. And her other goal was, I don't ever want you to get that pissed again so you can't look after yourself. I don't want you to be, I don't want you to not be okay. It's because we've already looked at compassion and care. And these aren't just a set of rules. They're negotiated in such a way with me that we understand what those words mean. I don't consent to you having sex with somebody else. What does that even mean? We need to rip it apart, to agree it, to look at it. Whereas I've also got other couples and thruples and people who will then send through a list, and it's a whole set of criteria. And if you do this one, there's £100 fine. And if you do this one, there's £100 benefit. And I'm like, this is not what it, but that's
Beyonce gets several million per baby or something.
No. So, well, I don't know. Yes,
That
from
according
what
to
the
what we've
rumour
heard.
is. But it's so interesting isn't it, how we control and manipulate. And I don't care if you want to put a baby in. You're not going to that because I've got fucking cancer and I'm old. But it's not about money. It's about what it costs me on my body, how I am, who I am. It's understanding your value.
And I think that's 90% of the work that I do when I work with couples is all about perception. And I think anyone who does relationship work will say, you've got somebody's understanding and perception here, somebody's understanding and perception here. And 90% of relationship work is to try and bring that a little bit closer and have that shared understanding of one another's perceptions. That is literally relationship work in a nutshell. And if you develop some of those skills to be able to do that work in any relationship, family, BDSM, I think when we do have quite complex relationships or multiple relationships or relationships with additional dynamics within them, if you can do the work to be able to do that with the person that you're with, that is the best piece of advice I think I can give anyone in terms of making things communicative. And communication is the fundamental of everything I'm talking about.
And for me, so is the understanding. Comprehension is often missed out. If you imagine that you are the middle of a flower and I'm the middle of a flower, and these are our petals, and they sort of cross over in the middle by this much. This is the truth and reality. The bigger chunk is my perception of what was just done. How many times have you will go out, if I were to set an interview here of what we talked about, all of you will have a different answer. All of you will have a different perception. And it's the same when you're talking with someone and yourself. This is the fucking problem. Everything comes with a bias of how we view life and what it means. It's really important to look at those things. We look at things like transgenerational trauma. The people who have transgenerational trauma in its true entirety are either, you're not going to like this one, I'm still going to say it, I'm going to use a very specific colour and a very specific religion. The people who have transgenerational trauma are Jewish people and black people. You might have transgenerational trauma on some level because of what's happened, but you haven't had hundreds of thousands of years of persecution because of who you are. And that gets fucking fed down the generations. It's shocking how much it's fed down the generations. It changes your genetics, it wraps protein around it, and it makes you expect the world to be different or suffer. And then everybody gets that. Everybody then starts to treat everybody like that. And it's really fucking complex. If you have sexual generational trauma, again, that can be passed down, not at that level, but certainly at the next levels. All of these things impact you. It sometimes isn't even your fucking shit. And I always say one of my favourite expressions is, unfortunately, you are not responsible for the hand of cards you are dealt, but you are fucking responsible for how you play them. And if we get stuck into, well, it's not fair, I've got a shit hand, well, you might as well give up now. What we can do is say, how can I make this work for me? Where is my power? Where is my empowerment? What do I want? And see the positive and feed yourself. Like, you wouldn't not feed a 5-year-old child for 12 hours because you want them to lose weight. Well, fucking hope you wouldn't. You should go in jail if that's the way you see things. You wouldn't do it. It's not okay. But you also wouldn't give that child 45 packets of sweets. Actually, that's not true. My second eldest has got this amazing relationship with this 2-year-old, and I fucking love this 2-year-old. This 2-year-old, it's cute now, it's not really cute, but she swears like a fishwife. She is shocking, and my God, she makes me laugh, and she just lives off sugar. That is not a good future when we look at it now. However, that's the problem. We get involved with, oh, but it's so funny. No, it's not, because when she's doing it at 9 or 10, she's going to get into trouble.
Because her peer group's not going to like it.
Yeah, her peer groups, her school, the other parents, it's all just going to blow up. So I think a really good thing for us to do is, if I wouldn't treat myself like that at that age, why am I allowing that to happen now? That's where our value lies, the way you would treat yourself. Or if you have another child in your life, or if you have someone, if you have a horse, if you have a dog, if you have a kitten or a cat, hopefully you wouldn't kick any of those. I mean, good luck kicking a horse, if I can take the head off. But hopefully you are not that sort of person. So why do we allow it to do it to ourselves?
Okay, different question for me.
Yeah.
Something from earlier you said about not giving people recommendations.
Mm-hmm.
What about when people do the reverse, when they start warning others about people?
Perception is reality. Let's get that one straight. So this is where we come into the clusterfuck, don't we? We do. Your perception of how I've watched really fucking toxic people together. They are unbelievably bad, and it looks and feels like abuse, and it's horrific. And when they break up and they go to other people, they end up in these wonderful relationships. Some people are toxic just by being together. Some people have too much shit that gets in the way of what they're doing. Some people have a perception. So even in my therapy room, what I hear from you, whether you like this or not, is, okay, I hear that that was your experience and that's what it's like for you. I wonder what's influencing that. I wonder what's really going on. I wonder what biases you have. I wonder what happened. We have such different realities. And we are very much in that way forward now, saying that person's a bad person. I was written to, I'll come back to you, I promise, and we're near the end as well. I was written to a couple of months ago by somebody who said, my Dom's raped me. And I was like, oh my God, I'm so sorry to hear that. And then they went on to explain everything, which, by the way, I didn't ask for. So it's quite interesting, that level of dumping sometimes that people do. And what this person explained was a really sad situation. They agreed that they would never fuck when she is in a little headspace because she doesn't want sex as a 5-year-old. You know what I'm saying there for the bunny ears, yeah? So that's not right for her. She went to the toilet, he did something slightly different. So they were very much playing daddy and little at that. No, they were playing BDSM, very much power exchange at this time. She went to the toilet. She said, "Can we please stop? I just need a wee." Off she goes. She has a wee. He said, "Leave the door open." And he watches her wipe herself. She immediately goes into a little space. She comes out and they end up having sex because it was the end of the session and that's what they were doing. Who's in the wrong now? Who is in the wrong in that moment? Fuck. Is it her because she can't communicate where she is? Should he have read her mind and seen that she had changed in some way? Can he even? And yet what she's doing all over FetLife is saying how he raped her, how vicious it was, how awful it was. Who is right? What's that perception about? And actually, these are unpopular. I still go back to accountability. Someone came into the workshop quite a few years ago and they were saying, when I come out of subspace, I tend to punch the person I'm with. And they said, "Are you going to be like everyone else who tells me I shouldn't fucking do that?" And I said, "Yes, I am."
They left, didn't they?
Yeah, they did. Well, after a little bit more. But we have to be accountable for us. If we can't communicate where we are, even with trauma and where we go into that part of our brain, we have to learn how to, because you are the only person who can keep yourself safe. That fucker isn't going to, and cannot read your mind or sometimes your body. Even though we give out symptoms, tachycardic changes, temperature changes, bodily shifts, someone has to be in the right space to do that. I don't know about you, but when you're fucking turned on and you want to screw somebody, a lot of your functions aren't working. Should you, could you? It's really complex. So, what are you going to say?
I'm going to ask something private.
Okay.
I think curiosity is our last thing that I will say is if anybody shares an opinion of anybody on the scene in the community with me, I think that's okay. I think it's all right to receive that information. Yeah. Thank you for the gift of your information. Yeah. That will allow me to be more curious. I might ask different questions. I might go about things slightly differently. But I want to make my own determination. I want to make my own judgment. And I do give everybody the ability to make a first impression, and I think that's important. But will that not, I'm a human being, will that create bias in me? Of course it will. But I think, how do you take that information? How do you remain open-minded and also curious?
And how many people are giving you that information? What does that look like?
Yeah.
I come back to a promise. Is it 3 or 4 people? What does it mean? And are they 3 or 4 people that are friends with the first person who says the same because they've heard something? I was saying in the car coming up, wasn't I, that quite a few years ago I had an interaction with somebody who the interactions were not healthy and were not good. Very much even to the point of if you were giving me a blowjob in the kitchen and one of your kids walked in, you carry on. And perhaps your daughters would like to join in.
The relationship.
Why did you react to the second one and not the first? Think about that for a second. Fuck me, they're both bad, aren't they? On so many levels. And all my kids are overage. Is that relevant? That fucking isn't. And it was like this person was not very healthy. And then when I had cancer, they contacted me again. And their next phrase to me was, "Oh, I didn't realise you were damaged. I don't want you now." Ended up getting with a very young person on the scene. Very young. I immediately had a problem with that. This person is now gaining followers. She's actually up to 130,000 followers. She's doing all this stuff. All these pictures start to come out. I'm going to stick my fucking nose in. I am that DM sometimes, and very much if I saw her in trouble, I'd be straight over. There isn't even a DM that's going to stop me. And I said to her, "Listen, you don't have to take my advice. I can appreciate that I'm coming across as really fucking sanctimonious right now, and I want to share to you that the person that you are with, and it's not just me, I have at least 6 other people who report abuse and different things that have happened, and it's really violent and it's all not very nice." I thought she might say blank me or whatever. She went, what she actually said was, "Fuck off, you old, fat, jealous cow." What she actually said to me, I was like, "Okay, thank you very much for your time. I hope that you are safe." And a year later, guess what happens? And she does get in contact with me and she says, "I'm really sorry, you were absolutely right." That's okay. I just hope that you're okay and I hope that you are safe. Because that's all we can do. So sometimes we do see stuff, and the legal reporting system reports that 7% of crimes that are reported are not factually based, they are made up. Really bad opinion here, take it how you will, that's okay by me. On the scene, I reckon that's at least double. I reckon it's somewhere between 14 to 20% of false accusations because of the perception that we have. That still makes most of them real and not okay. Let's not forget that. However, how do we learn and what do we do from that is fucking complex. You were going to say.
So this isn't about recommendation of people, it's about resources. So like you said, I've been to
Yeah.
talk about the psychology of kink, and I found it wasn't really about psychology, it was more about explaining what the kinks and is and the different types of practitioners.
Like a 101.
Yeah. So I was wondering if you said, I think you said Richard Sprott before?
Richard Sprott is a really good researcher and does a lot of very factual evidence-based stuff. There are really good workshops out there. Find the one that works for you. Resources really matter. However, when they have opinion, that is really different to factual and reality. There are like the Pink Therapy Register, but again, that's a personal preference. Who do you have and why? What does that mean? What qualifies that person to talk about what they're talking about? Is it experience? Is it research? Is it knowledge? What is it? And then when you listen, you have to understand if someone's just talking about experience, it's really different to the research and the facts. So we have to make those decisions. Do I think there are hundreds of really good pieces out there on us? No, I fucking don't, because it's not out there. It's not out there yet.
Good research needs funding, and unfortunately that's.
We're not that interesting when it comes to funding.
I think
We're
we're
not.
time.
So that's hard, yeah, I know. So we have to think about that and our safety. However, I do think there are a few groups and there are a few communities, but sometimes when I look at them, they're not as safe as we think they are because of the person who's saying it. And then you know something about that person that is really toxic or dangerous. So I think speak to as many people as you can, get a lot of opinion, get out, have conversations. Don't be afraid to ask for recommendations. Don't be afraid to say, can I speak to some of your play partners or your exes or see how it is? Don't be afraid to ask those questions, because the thing that comes through of this fucking bollocks of a good sub or a good top wouldn't do that. Yes, they fucking would. There is no such thing as a good sub or a good top or whatever they are, because it's about my safety.
I think I agree with that. I think this notion of absolute, goodies and baddies and heroes and villains, and it's very Marvel or
Well,
Disney.
so enough.
So yeah, it's very.
Domino.
If you loved me, you would.
Yeah, it's all very Marvel, it's all very Disney, we've all been indoctrinated with it, but essentially there's human beings. Some human beings are better fits with other human beings than others. And, keep an open mind, talk to as many people as you can in the circumstances. Some you might have the best human being in the world, I guarantee there'll be a time of a life where even this one's been a cunt, right? Cynthia, hold my hand up.
A few weeks ago, actually, with my
Good
daughter.
people do bad things in the right circumstances, and if somebody's interaction with them has been in that window of time, understandably their opinion of them's not going to be very high. So, I think we have to
And with a
remember-
breakup. When you break up, you become the worst version of yourself and you attack each other. And good people do bad things and bad people do good things. End of. And we really have to watch that. So I think when people are saying things, thank you.
Why? What's
Thank you
the
for the information. I really appreciate that. And then my next point is I'm now going to be curious about that. I'm going to keep an open mind. I'm going to see. I had somebody refer to me who has broken apparently 2 people's consent, but I also know this person had the most amazing time with them. Who's right? Probably all of them on some level. The question is, why was that right? Why was that wrong? And when you look at these two, it becomes quite interesting. There's a lack of maybe awareness from this person, but then are they neurodiverse? And then is that an excuse? No, it's not. What does that mean here? This person had such a great time with them. And we also know what abusers tend to do is make sure that they might abuse one person, but they keep 2 or 3 happy because it looks better. So it's just all about being
Just
curious and
your
keeping your open mind.
thresholds, isn't
Yeah.
it? You adjust your thresholds according on the information that you've got, and anybody can give you new information at any time. But what does that mean for you?
And you don't want to hear it because you've got confirmation bias. You don't want to. If your cock is someone else's mind, or your cunt's in someone else's mind, and your goodness or your whole financial dependencies with somebody, all these other things start to influence us, you only want to hear what you want to hear anyway. And that's part of the problem. Are you really willing to listen to someone who says something and take it maybe with a pinch of salt, but also with a pinch of sugar? How do you find that balance? Thank you for the information. You don't have to call everyone a jealous fat cow. You know what I mean? It's okay. And their perception might be different to yours with another human being. So what is toxic, again, goes back to that. What is abusive and what isn't? And it's so complex. Anyway, thank you very much for your time and see you in January.